I was enjoying what looked like a stable and enviable suburban life, until the moment my own daughter casually exposed my husband's affair at the children's play park, right in the middle of breakfast, with a bowl of cereal in her hands. And clearly, I was the last to know that my marriage was falling apart. I stared into the bathroom mirror, patting concealer over the dark circles under my eyes, the result of a sleepless night spent analyzing cash flow for a client. I'm Evelyn Hart, a personal finance advisor for the ultra-wealthy in Connecticut. Even while feeding my daughter, my eyes stayed glued to my laptop screen, temporarily parked on the kitchen table, monitoring a $200 million investment fund's liquidity. "Mommy, I want Cheerios," said Isabel, my 6-year-old, pulling me back to the present. Just another Tuesday morning in our colonial-style home in Oakville. I had no idea that 1 second later, in the middle of the soft clinking of a spoon in a bowl of milk, she would calmly detonate the life I thought was rock solid. "Daddy hugged a lady in gym clothes at the park," Isabel said, milk dripping down her chin. I forced a professional smile, the same one I used when billionaire clients asked if buying a superyacht for their mistress was tax deductible. "What did she look like?" I asked, light as air. Isabel replied, "She wore round glasses and had a flower on her hand." "A flower?" My heart clenched. "A flower tattoo, exactly like the one I'd seen on Sienna Voss's wrist, Robert's rival investment advisor during the $200 million Wexford Tech IPO deal." I slowly set my coffee cup down, careful not to let anyone see my trembling fingers. "When was that?" I asked, cutting Isabel's sandwich into two perfect halves, as if everything was still normal. "Sunday," she shrugged. "When you were busy, Daddy said he'd take me to the play park." Isabel added solemnly, "Daddy said don't tell Mommy because it's grown-up stuff, and it would make Mommy sad." 8 years of marriage, one sweet, beautiful child, and those framed photos from vacations, and perfect Christmases lining the hallway that made the neighbors jealous. All of it was just backdrop to one humiliating truth. My husband was involved with the woman he always called his professional rival. "Did she look like anyone you've seen before?" I asked, my financial brain already logging every detail. "She looked like the lady from Dad's year-end party," Isabel said. "The one Daddy talked to forever at the wine bar." My throat went dry, Sienna Voss. The woman rumored to manipulate stock prices, recently hired by a fund that was now directly competing with Robert's firm. Isabel innocently stirred her milk and added, "She has a flower on her hand, like Auntie Ava." I nodded slightly. That tattoo, I remembered at the company party, Sienna had subtly covered her wrist when my daughter complimented the flower. A cold sensation ran down my spine. But I kept my composure down to the last detail. Clearing the bowls, brushing my daughter's hair, sending her off to the school bus. Then I sent Robert a sweet text. "Good luck with the big deal, love." That big deal he was handling might have had more layers than I thought. I didn't confront him. Not right away. Only amateurs do that. I did what any woman who understands the financial game would do. Gather data. I called my assistant Dana, canceled all my morning meetings with the excuse of urgent family matters. Technically, not a lie. Discovering that your husband may be involved in both an affair and insider trading more than qualifies as a family emergency. By 10 a.m., I had a plan. Not some emotional outburst, not torching the house, not hurling his clothes into the yard like in some TV drama. No, for me, retaliation, just like any high-stakes investment, required precision, timing, and evidence. Saturday morning, Robert casually said over breakfast, "I'm thinking of taking Izzy out today. Give you some rest." So thoughtful, a model dad, using his own daughter as an alibi. "That sounds lovely." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'll rest." 20 minutes after they left, I parked 3 blocks from the park, wearing a Yankees cap and oversized sunglasses, rule number 7 in crisis management. Verification requires tangible proof. A child's account, while believable, isn't enough in cases of divorce or financial misconduct. I sat on a wooden bench with a direct line of sight to the playground and the big oak tree Isabel called the place where Daddy hugged that lady. I didn't have to wait long as my daughter merged into the crowd of kids climbing the slide. Robert glanced at his phone, then headed toward the oak tree. 5 minutes later, Sienna appeared. Black gym clothes, round glasses, rose tattoo on her left wrist. I raised my phone, zoomed in. Through the lens, I saw him lean in, his hand too low on her back, her fingers slipping into his hair. When they kissed, after making sure no kids were watching, I hit the shutter repeatedly, every frame crystal clear, every pixel of betrayal captured. Robert suddenly looked up, as if sensing he was being watched. I ducked, retying my shoelace, the lens trembling ever so slightly. Enough to throw my heart off beat, but not the moment part of me went numb. 8 years of marriage collapsed into a few secretive minutes behind a tree, while our daughter played not 20 meters away. But another part of me, the one used to crisis, to numbers and strategy, kicked in. I didn't shatter, didn't cry, didn't rush in asking stupid questions like, "Why are you cheating on me?" I calculated, I observed. And in my mind, I'd already begun planning the most precise counterattack of my life. Sunday dinner was quieter than usual, but for me, it was the perfect time to launch phase 2. It was no longer a family dinner like before. It was a chessboard I had already set while Robert was busy talking on the phone with a partner at the office, the classic excuse in every affair. I opened the evidence folder on my iPad and started a video call with Laura Kingsley, the woman who once ruled Wall Street and the only person I trusted to see the entire picture. Laura listened as I summarized, eyes narrowing behind silver frames. She examined each photo of Robert and Sienna, every line of metadata I'd carefully annotated. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to that controlled fury only Wall Street legends develop after decades of dealing with greedy sharks. "That's Sienna Voss," she said, placing a hand on her chest. "Rival advisor in the Wexford Tech IPO deal." Her voice lowered. "Sienna Voss was once investigated for money laundering in Boston. She's not stupid, but Robert is. Don't get angry, Evelyn. People who think they can control greed always trap themselves." I said nothing, just nodded. Laura continued. "Now listen carefully. You don't need to expose them. You need to let them expose themselves. We don't fight with emotion, we fight with procedure. And remember, until we have everything, Robert needs to believe you still love him." That entire night, I sat in my office, laptop light casting my face like the ID photo of someone about to be reborn. I restored all of Robert's emails from backups, using the hidden keylogger software Laura sent. It bypassed two-factor authentication. By 3 a.m., I had what I needed: a forged contract bearing the CEO of Westbrook's signature, stating that 3% of the equity would be temporarily transferred to an offshore Cayman account under the name of Voss Capital, Sienna's shell company. I sent the file to Laura. Her reply came almost immediately. "That's enough. Don't add anything more. Stay calm. Begin the next step tomorrow morning." I stared at that message for a long time, then closed the laptop. In my mind, everything started to align: emotions, evidence, motives, and a plan cold as ice. Tuesday morning, the kitchen smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee and golden waffle batter. I placed the plate on the table and poured coffee into the white mug labeled "World's Greatest Dad," last year's birthday gift from our daughter. "I took the job in Switzerland," I said calmly, "planning to bring our daughter by year's end." Robert looked up, a faint smile of relief forming, the smile of someone who just spotted a safe exit. "Really? I'm happy for you," he said, his voice cracking with joy. Until I added, "Isabel and I will settle there." His fork froze mid-air. The waffle was about to break apart, just like his perfect life. The waffle wasn't the only thing shattered that Tuesday morning. Robert's expression shifted faster than a fortune wheel, confused, relieved, then horrified as he realized something. "Isabel, settle," he stammered, lowering the fork with a trembling hand. But my fund is here. My job, all my relationships? I asked innocently, pushing the strawberry jam jar across the table. Your relationship, is it a very close one? Our eyes met, and in that moment, I could see the gears of his Harvard-trained brain spinning, calculating risks, assessing probabilities, and finally landing on the terrifying question, what do you know? He finally spoke, slipping into his leadership voice, the one reserved for difficult clients. Rational, authoritative, completely devoid of real emotion. We need to talk about custody. Already in progress, I replied. Miles Cohen is drafting the divorce papers, I said, my tone steady, like discussing business. Robert choked on his coffee, spraying it onto his crisp white shirt. Miles Cohen, one of the few attorneys who rarely loses. You hired Miles? He asked, voice pitched high. I shrugged, my smile almost blank. Oh, Miles owed me a favor. Today, he's repaying it. Robert stared at me, his eyes no longer those of a husband, but of a businessman calculating losses. What do you want, Evelyn? I replied simply. I want fairness. I'll take 70% of the assets and full custody. Then I stood up, clearing the dishes, as if that entire conversation was just part of my morning routine. Robert's face turned from red to white, then to the same gray as the wall behind him. I could see real fear, not from love, but from calculation. He realized this wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about federal crimes. I picked up a napkin, wiped the coffee drip from the table, and said softly, You have until noon to decide. A peaceful divorce, or you lose much more. The blood drained from Robert's face so quickly. I briefly wondered if he might faint. What are you implying? He whispered, glancing toward the stairs to see if our daughter was witnessing her father's professional death in real time. I'm not implying anything, I shrugged, though our daughter did make some interesting observations about your Sunday activities. Kids notice everything, don't they? Especially your special friend with the tattoo hiding behind a tree. He panicked, scrambling to explain. Honey, I can explain. Save it for the SEC hearing, I cut in, glancing at the clock. Isabel was due for school in 3 minutes. I whispered to myself beneath the sound of running water. You once told me that in the market, whoever has the information wins. Thank you for that lesson. The next 48 hours unfolded like a psychological thriller, with me directing every twist. Robert quietly moved into the guest room without being told, a silent confession hanging in the air like luxury wallpaper at a crime scene. I maintained a perfectly normal front for our daughter, helping with homework and nodding politely when Robert used the same old excuse about working late at the fund. That fund, according to Aunt Ava's intel network of blockchain experts with uncanny reach, had a visitor named Sienna Voss spotted at 9 p.m. and leaving at midnight. Friday night, the kitchen was lit only by warm yellow light and the soft clink of glasses. Ava sat across from me, her leather jacket lazily draped over the chair. So, what are you actually planning to do? She asked, swirling her glass of red wine. I looked into the dark liquid, rich as blood, then answered slowly. I don't just plan to get back what's mine. I plan to burn it all. Maximize alimony, strip the house, his retirement funds. I turned the Cabernet glass in my hand, thinking. I was thinking bigger than just taking half his assets and his pride. Ava raised an eyebrow, the tattoo on her arm dancing with anticipation. I'm thinking about the CFO seat he's been chasing for 3 years, I explained. The one nearly guaranteed if he pulls off the Westbrook IPO. The seat that would double his income and finally give him a corner office with a golf course view. The seat he was willing to sleep with a rival advisor to secure, Ava said dryly. Exactly, I nodded. And what happens to that seat when the board finds out their rising star is negotiating trading strategy in bed? Ava's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I wouldn't, I agreed, pouring her another glass. But Laura might. He thinks I'm just the wife who knows how to stay quiet. But I'm the one who understands the flow of his money better than any of them. Ava chuckled, voice husky like the night wind. If he's playing chess in the boardroom, you're playing in the global data system. I took a sip, quietly opened my laptop, the screen casting a bluish glow on my tired face. $12.4 million total, I said. Ava exhaled, leaned back, laughed softly. So from one affair, you've landed in federal insider trading territory. You really do know how to pick them. I smiled, thin as a blade. I didn't pick. I just audited what was already mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat under the computer light, listening to the steady drizzle outside the window. In the middle of all those cold numbers, I saw Robert's face, the man who once held my hand on our wedding day, now hiding behind wire transfers and mouse clicks. What I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was something far quieter. Quiet like the moment before a storm hits. The next night, dinner looked like any other. White tablecloth, scented candles, our daughter cheerfully chatting about saying goodbye to her classmates. But the air between me and Robert was thick, like the room itself knew something was about to explode. The lady in gym clothes said Daddy told her work secrets, Isabel said. Scooping mashed potatoes, Robert's fork clattered loudly against the plate. He stammered, "You must have heard that wrong?" "She has a picture on her hand," Isabel clarified helpfully. "The one Daddy kissed in the park." The amazing thing about children, besides their innocence and joy, is their total inability to keep family secrets. Maybe it was just Daddy's friend. She's probably just a coworker. I chimed in smoothly, because even though we were divorcing, I didn't want my daughter's childhood tainted. We had agreed. Every question would be answered with just enough truth, never blackening the other. Grown-ups sometimes have complicated friendships. She's just an advisor, sometimes helps Daddy analyze data. Then why did you take pictures of Daddy? Isabel asked, raising her milk for a sip. Silence. Robert cornered me in the kitchen after Isabel went upstairs. He had talked to Sienna, he began, trying to sound firm, though his eyes betrayed fear. We agreed to end it. The way he said "we," pushing me back into the position of outsider. I want to fix the marriage. Classic. Step 1 of the cheater's playbook. Minimize, end it, reconcile. That's good, I replied, scrolling emails on my phone with theatrical indifference. Before or after Grant Pierce was appointed lead on the IPO? He inhaled sharply, confirmation I'd struck again. He nearly collapsed into the chair, sweat soaking his collar. I stood, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "Laura invited us to brunch Sunday. You should go, and remember to bring the signed divorce papers." He looked up, eyes bloodshot. "Evelyn, don't. I can explain." I cut him off. "No need explanations, only matter in court. Here, I only care about the signature." When he went silent, I turned and walked away. The hallway light cast my shadow long across the floor, cold and straight like a boundary line. Saturday night, the bedroom was soaked in dim yellow light and the faint scent of cheap cologne. Robert's attempt to mask the smell of fear. He stood leaning against the wardrobe, voice trembling. "Evelyn! I'll transfer $10 million into your account. Let's stop the divorce. I won't see Sienna again, I swear." I looked at him, eyes cold as glass. "You think I asked for a divorce because of money?" Robert stepped closer, desperate. "What do you want? The house? The fund? I'll disappear if you want. Just forgive me. It was only one mistake." I tilted my head slightly, voice calm. "Let's go to the party together tomorrow." After he left the room, I quietly opened my phone. The signal from the wiretap device linked to the landline in the living room had just lit up. Since Thursday night, I had installed that device on the house line, a habit from an old profession, like locking the door before bed. Just as I expected, Robert immediately called Grant Pierce, his voice urgent. "She knows everything, Grant. She has photos, the transactions. What do we do?" On the other end, Grant's voice was husky, chillingly calm. "Say nothing. Just get through the acquisition phase, then everything will be in our hands. After that, she'll have no voice left." I stared at the screen as it recorded, my palms slick with sweat, The next morning, I sent the audio file to Ava with one line: "Prepare evidence for the SEC. No trace." Ava replied with a single flame emoji. By noon, I happened to appear at Oakville Country Club, the usual weekend hangout of the Wexford Tech Board. I wore a navy blue dress, carried a latte, and, accidentally, ran into Miles Cohen, who owed me a major favor, and let him speak just loud enough on the club's front porch. "Evelyn, I just looked over the $200 million IPO file. Heard there's insider trading tied to Westbrook. You sure know how to poke the beehive." His voice rang out just enough for the nearby table, where two Westbrook board members were seated, to glance over a tiny seed, dropped in the right soil, spreads faster than any virus. That afternoon, Robert flooded me with messages. "What are you doing? Emergency meeting tomorrow, they're suspicious." I didn't reply. I only saved the last one. "If everything falls apart, I won't let you walk away." I reread that line several times, as if to memorize the tone of despair from a man who once thought he was untouchable Sunday. The brunch at Laura Kingsley's villa in Zurich Hill unfolded with a suffocating kind of elegance. Laura, 60 years old, silver waves in her hair, wrapped in a cream cardigan, slowly poured champagne and asked, "Robert, I heard you worked very closely with Sienna Voss on the Wexford Tech deal." The question floated out, as light as smoke, but everyone knew it carried the weight of interrogation. Robert forced a smile, gripping his glass so tight his knuckles whitened. "Yes, just technical collaboration. Nothing serious." Laura tilted her head, smiling. "I hope so. I don't care for people who confuse finance and feelings." Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just a few words. "Need to meet not his lover. Grant Pierce pressured me. Signed, Sienna Voss." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then looked up and caught Laura's gaze. She gave the slightest nod, as if she'd already anticipated what came next. The champagne glass in my hand tilted slightly, the light reflecting off the tabletop into a thin streak like a blade. I set the phone down and said calmly, "Excuse me, I need to step outside for a few minutes." I stepped into the backyard, where the late afternoon sun filtered through the olive trees Laura had planted back when she ran Vale. Capital Sienna was already there, visibly tense, her white coat fluttering slightly in the breeze, eyes darting around as if afraid someone was following her. As I approached, she spoke quickly, her voice shaking. "I'm not your husband's lover, Evelyn. I'm just the messenger." I said nothing, only looked straight at her, waiting. She swallowed hard, then lowered her voice. "Grant is shorting 40 million shares of Wexford Tech through a hidden fund. He's using Robert as a pawn. Everything, from having me get close, seduce your husband, to leaking documents, was part of a plan to crash the stock price and buy it out before the IPO." Sienna pulled out her phone, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped it. "I kept a copy," she whispered. "Grant's emails. He ordered me to get close to Tile so I could fabricate false evidence in case the plan collapsed." She transferred the file to my device, then looked up, eyes filled with guilt. "I was wrong for staying silent this long, but I don't want to go down with them." I looked at her and said softly, "You just did the most right thing in your entire career." Sienna pressed her lips together, tears falling, and I simply nodded, saved the file, and turned back toward the house. In the dining room, everyone still sat around the brunch table as if time hadn't passed. The clink of silverware, the fizz of champagne bubbles, unchanged. I walked straight to Laura and asked for a private room. And for Tile to join us, I placed my phone on the oak table. "Laura," I said slowly, "Grant Pierce just shorted 40 million shares of Wexford Tech. Directive emails sent from a private server. Metadata confirms 9:47 p.m. Thursday night." The room went so quiet we could hear the wind brushing past the curtains. Laura looked up, her silver eyes cold as metal. "Are you certain?" I needed only one sentence. "Absolutely." Robert still hadn't understood. He looked at me, confused, then at Laura, then back at me again. "Evelyn." What's happening? I looked at him, smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in my eyes. No, Robert, I replied, voice low and deliberate. This is a federal financial crime. He stood abruptly, his chair crashing behind him, hands trembling as they touched his forehead. Laura remained seated, silently scanning the documents. I've contacted the SEC, I continued. They're willing to listen, but they want someone inside to talk. You have 48 hours. Confess, cooperate, and maybe protect your daughter. Or get ready to watch everything fall apart. Robert stumbled back, eyes wide as if he were staring into an abyss. Evelyn, you promised. You're destroying me, he said, voice cracking. I shook my head slightly. No, you already did that. I'm just trying to save the father of my child. I retrieved my phone, stood up, and said to Laura, The rest belongs to the law now. She only nodded, saying nothing, her eyes full of both respect and gravity. Then I powered off the device, behind me. I heard Robert calling out, desperate, panicked. But I didn't turn around. Because some beginnings, some choices, they have to make on their own. That night, Robert carried his suitcase to Laura's guest house, a small glass cottage at the edge of the Olive Garden, where yellow light flickered against the stone wall. Filled with the scent of pinewood and the metallic undertone of fear, he stood at the doorway, looking at me like he was waiting for a sentence to be handed down. I simply pointed at the wooden desk, already prepped with a laptop and power outlet. Let's begin. Laura entered, silver hair tied back, a fountain pen clipped to the edge of her notebook, like she was stamping the start of a crisis meeting. The plan is to gather precise evidence on Grant, she said, her voice both low and crisp. No emotion, just procedure. Robert opened the laptop, placed his fingers on the keyboard. I handed him a USB key. Install this keylogger on Grant's laptop quietly, no trace. We need access logs, metadata, keystroke patterns. His own hands will sign his guilt. Sienna arrived next, still in her white coat, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, but her voice steadier now. I have access to the Bloomberg terminal at the office. I'll back up all short orders, from the hidden fund to the fragmented child orders across time intervals, full-time and sales, fix logs too. I nodded. Export the full audit trail. Sienna shut the door, sat down, pulled out her laptop. The tap of the enter key sounded like early rain hitting taut canvas. Laura flipped open her notebook, jotted a few lines, then closed it and looked at each of us. Remember, revenge is an investment. She paused, her silver eyes calm like a lake before a storm. We don't get loud. We get the timing right. That night, the guest house echoed only with the fan and the soft clicking of mice. The next morning, Robert's hands trembled as he plugged the USB into Grant's office machine. His reflection in the black screen looked like someone else. Smaller, weaker, more honest, Sienna flooded the drive with trade blotters, order book snapshots, position reports. Ava dropped transaction IDs like tiny glowing breadcrumbs. I gathered everything into an external drive, labeled WBT/Grant, Master Evidence. As I finished labeling, I noticed a thin line of adhesive sticking to my fingers. The tacky feel on my skin snapped me into awareness. Truth clings, and once touched, can't be rinsed off. Monday morning, I met SEC agent Dana at a tucked-away breakfast spot in an old stone building by the river, where at 7:30 a.m., there was only the sound of spoons tapping cups and the barista's shoes gliding over wood floors. Dana arrived in a dark trench coat, movements crisp, gaze direct. What do you have for me? I placed the 3-terabyte hard drive on the table. Matte casing, white label. My handwriting blocky and clean like a balance sheet. Short positions, forged emails, roundabout transfers, server logs, metadata, voice memo of Grant's call, hash verified. Dana moved her espresso aside, slipped on thin gloves, opened her shock-proof bag, and received the drive like one might receive a transplant heart. I owed you one, Dana said, eyes never leaving the evidence. I didn't forget. She tapped the casing gently. The sound was dry and sharp. And this is a federal indictment waiting to happen. I handed over a thin envelope, printed metadata of Grant's emails from the private server, timestamps, IP addresses, device fingerprints. Dana skimmed it, the corner of her mouth twitching into a smile that never fully arrived. The key. We didn't shake hands, just a nod. I picked up the still warm cup, the scent of citrus clinging to my fingertips from the latte's peel. As I stood, the morning light swept across the table, catching the master evidence label before it disappeared into the black shock case. Dana spoke softly, as if to the air. Enough for federal prosecution. Outside, the sky was so blue it felt like Connecticut had never known greed. I stood by the river for a long while, the water lapping gently against the rocks. In my mind, every piece fell into place. Robert in the guest house, Sienna at the Bloomberg terminal, Ava planting flags in Liechtenstein, Laura counting the clock. One image settled in me, the wooden table, the 3 terabyte drive, white label, the words master evidence. So still I could hear justice turning the page. Then I turned and walked away, knowing the wire was set, and all that was left was to pull. Everything was programmed like a chess match. Robert would, accidentally, drop a hint of suspicion into the company's internal chat group. Not enough to be considered an accusation, but just enough to trigger Grant Pierce's ego. On Thursday, Robert sent the message. We should double-check the internal trade logs. There are some discrepancies with the server data. 13 minutes later, Grant responded, his tone sharp as steel. Emergency meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory attendance. Sienna Voss, you too. Robert replied with a nod emoji and shut his laptop. He looked at me, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Are you sure? I just said quietly, don't overact. The truth will speak for itself. Friday morning. The air inside Westbrook Advisors headquarters was thick, like a storm holding its breath. The 27th floor conference room had its blinds shut, sunlight filtering through the gaps and casting slashes of light across the company logo. Like knife wounds, Grant sat at the head of the table, gray suit, deep blue tie, face expressionless, his right hand pressed on a stack of documents like he was holding down chaos. Robert walked in with a calm that was too practiced, and Sienna sat in the corner, gripping her pen so tight her knuckles were white. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Grant began, his voice straining for control, but the confidence in him was already cracked. There are signs of an internal leak regarding the Westbrook deal, and it seems... He paused, glancing at Robert. The source is our acting CFO, Mr. Hart. Robert stood, face steady. Would you care to clarify? Grant threw the folder onto the table. This email. You sent it to Sienna Voss. Instructions for trading before market open. Do you deny it? Robert took a deep breath, looked directly at him. If you trust that evidence, open the metadata. A beat of silence, tight as a pulled wire. Grant pressed his lips together and motioned for the tech staff to pull it up on the screen. The email appeared with sent from Robert Hart, Westbrook Advisors, sitting too perfectly in the corner. It looked manufactured. Robert folded his arms, voice eerily calm. Click File Properties. The room went dead silent. The cursor moved slowly, clicked Properties, then Details. A single line appeared, black text on white, cold and final. Created by G. Grant, Personal, 02:14 a.m., Thursday. No one said a word. Just Grant's shaky breathing, followed by the soft clatter of a pen dropping to the floor. Sienna lifted her head, her voice hoarse. I've already told the SEC everything, and now they want to talk to you. At that exact moment, the door burst open. 2 agents entered. Black suits, gold badges glinting under the lights. Grant Pierce, the lead agent announced, voice low and firm. You're under arrest for manipulation of securities and obstruction of justice. The first camera flash went off, followed by a dozen more flickering from the hallway, where reporters had been waiting. Grant backed away, choking. "You have no evidence!" One agent lifted a flash drive. "We have everything." Robert stared at the scene, eyes glazed, then turned toward me, standing just outside the room, arms crossed, my smile no longer about revenge, but proof. I said nothing. Sienna rose from her seat, let her pen drop to the table. A soft, sharp sound like the end of a song. As they led Grant past us, he turned, lost, and asked, "Who did this?" I answered quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. "The truth." When the door closed behind him, the room fell completely silent. Only the projector shut down, its light fading, leaving behind the faint smell of ozone and fear in the air. Robert sat down, buried his face in his hands. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you understand the cost of transparency." He nodded slightly, not daring to look up. Sienna walked out first, tossed her ID badge on the table, her voice rough. "I'm done." She glanced briefly at Robert, then hurried off. Maybe she'd used him, but before I exposed him, he'd had real feelings for her. Laura waited in the hallway, the morning light catching her silver hair like a halo. She looked at me, said nothing, then lifted her vintage watch and whispered, "Perfect." I smiled. A 4-week plan, 7 people, 3 terabytes of data, closed in 27 minutes. As I stepped out of the building, the wind carried the smell of coffee from the shop down the street, and I knew this wasn't just a win, it was a reminder. In every power game, sometimes all you need is to let the powerful destroy themselves with the evidence they created. Noon at the Zurich spa, steam blurred the glass, and the scent of bergamot orange oil drifted in the air. I sat beside Laura on white upholstered lounge chairs, each of us holding a mimosa, the orange fizz kissing the rim of the glass like a sigh. The manager brought us warm towels. On the table sat my phone, its screen lighting up with a flurry of notifications. I tapped to open them, a red ticker bar scrolling across. SEC and FBI executed warrants at Westbrook Advisors. Managing partner, Grant Pierce, in custody. Across from us, Grant's wife was still waiting for her top-coat nail polish to be applied, her diamond-ringed hand resting on a towel. I looked up, my voice calm, as if reading a weather report. "Your husband was just arrested for market manipulation." A beat of silence. She slowly pulled her hand back, looked out through the misted glass, then nodded like someone who had already expected it. "Our assets are clean. I suppose it's his girlfriends who are panicking now." Laura tilted her glass, a glint of humor in her eyes. "You really know how to pick your moment." Her phone buzzed again. "Wexford Tech cancels IPO," she said. Another update. WBT rebounds plus 42% in session. I exhaled, letting my back sink into the chair. The third notification came in like a gentle closing strike. Robert Hart cleared, retained CFO role. I didn't smile. I simply swirled the mimosa slightly, watching the ring of bubbles dissolve into a perfect circle. 8 months later, my office in Zurich opens to a balcony facing the lake, its surface a giant sheet of glass in deep green blue. On the desk, a Mont Blanc pen, a leather-bound notebook, and the latest AUM report. 1.2 billion US dollars. I signed 2 more high net worth contracts, the numbers flowing smoothly under the nib. My daughter had grown used to our new home, every morning running downstairs in her navy blazer like an arrow carrying laughter. Robert now consults remotely. The monthly transfers arrive on schedule, labeled simply, "Family Trust, Child Support." He doesn't call often. Sometimes he asks about our daughter. I send him photos of her. Nothing more. Not a word too much. Laura walked in, her sand-colored wool coat still on, setting a hair clip onto the cover of the board. Minutes. "Board meeting will be quick. Just keep your pace as always." Understated, airtight. I nodded. A single image could capture everything about today. The pale wood table, Lake Zurich framed in the background, and the document titled Board Resolution, Kingsley, non-executive director. I picked up the pen and signed. A soft, clear click. The sound of a new order locking into place. Robert Hart. The name popped up on my screen, and I froze mid-keystroke. It had been 8 months since the divorce proceedings wrapped up, everything resolved as cleanly as a financial transaction. Clear, legal, leaving no echoes. But sometimes, the silence between two people who once built an entire empire together is louder than any word. I answered, my voice steady, as always. Hello, Robert. I assume this isn't about child support, since this month's transfer came right on time. On the other end, his breath carried a hint of hesitation, followed by the words I had predicted exactly. The board just appointed me COO of the European division. And I need your advice. I let out a soft chuckle. A business offer from the man who unraveled my life. How fascinating. Robert paused for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. It's not out of sentiment. It's because no one understands the market. And people, like you do. I gently swirled my coffee cup, watching the thin steam rise into the crisp Zurich afternoon, then send over the proposal. But remember, Robert, strictly contract, strictly work. On the other end, he gave a short laugh, a sound tinged with gratitude and quiet regret. Understood. Thank you, Evelyn. I ended the call and looked out through the glass. The lake reflected strips of late afternoon light. Still, deep, no longer rippling, months later, my sister launched her blockchain finance studio, a space flooded with sunlight, its walls covered in price movement charts rendered like abstract art. That evening, we had dinner out on the terrace. Isabel shrugged with a giggle. Daddy only cuddles contracts now, not any lady. Laughter bubbled up, light and round like bubbles rising to the lake's surface. I looked at my daughter, then at Laura, reaching to serve her more salad, and suddenly realized that peace has its own sound. Not loud, not flashy, just the warmth of people who stay because they truly want to. The last light of day melted into the surface of Lake Zurich. A breeze gently stirred the curtains, tilting the mimosa on the table, its glass catching a sliver of sunlight. Soft as a breath, I sat still, needing neither escape nor validation, and simply smiled. Because in the end, freedom isn't leaving someone. It's returning to yourself, once you finally understand the worth of what was lost and what remains. After the animal rescue mission from the California wildfire, I flew home earlier than planned, without telling my husband, to cook an anniversary dinner for our 8th wedding year. I tiptoed step by step toward the living room window, only to suddenly hear my husband's best friend's young child call him Daddy, while the child's mother kissed my husband and said, Michael, you really are a wonderful father. That scene left me frozen in place. They were celebrating the birthday of a child unrelated to me, in the very house I paid for. I quietly recorded a video and left. The next morning, my husband came to my workplace and yelled, What horrible things you did last night. My name is Michelle, 35 years old, a veterinarian and owner of Harbor Light Animal Clinic in Cambridge, Boston. After nearly 3 consecutive weeks in California, helping rescue animals injured in the wildfires, the mission ended 3 days earlier than expected, and I decided to fly home that very afternoon. I booked a noon flight from San Francisco to Boston, set to arrive early in the evening. I wanted to be home before Michael could find out, to prepare dinner for our 8th wedding anniversary. I paid extra to upgrade to business class, just to come home a bit sooner, just to see his smile when I stepped through the door with a small gift in hand. Throughout the flight, I thought of him, of his favorite dinner, the red stew I learned to cook just for him, of the burgundy bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion. I pictured him opening the door, surprised, then smiling. In my suitcase was a special gift, a silver necklace engraved with a wolf's paw, symbolizing loyalty, which I picked out after a successful surgery on an injured old dog in California. I believed it would be the perfect gift for a perfect anniversary. But life is rarely as perfect as we imagine. When the Uber dropped me off in front of our quiet neighborhood in Cambridge, I saw a silver sedan parked outside the house. That car, disturbingly familiar. I looked through the window and felt my chest tighten. It was Tiffany's Honda, Michael's close colleague and friend, a third-grade teacher at the nearby elementary school. I remembered clearly, just yesterday morning, Tiffany had posted on Instagram that she'd be attending a 3-day teacher conference in Worcester. So why was she here, while I hadn't even returned home yet? A cold intuition made me ask the driver to drop me off at the end of the street. I quietly walked to the house, carrying the small gift box. The closer I got, the clearer the voices and laughter from inside became. Warm, intimate, familiar, but not meant for me. Through the slightly open door, I saw Michael blowing out candles with a little girl. The child called him Daddy, in a voice so innocent and bright, and he smiled, lifted her into his arms, kissed her hair, and said in that sweet voice I once believed was meant only for me, "Daddy's here, sweetheart." I stood frozen. The air around me felt frozen too. The gift box nearly slipped from my hand. I caught it with the other. I saw Tiffany, in a light blue floral dress, standing next to him, her gaze tender and intimate in a way that needed no explanation. On the table was a birthday cake with the words, "Happy Birthday, Lisa." And Lisa was Tiffany's 3-year-old daughter, the one I'd once noted had the same blue eyes as my husband. I used to think they were just close friends, that Michael was only helping Tiffany because she was a single mom. But now, hearing Daddy again, I understood everything. That child was calling my husband her father. I stepped back, then again, trying not to let anyone hear my broken breathing. I turned and hurried to the gate, heart pounding like it would explode. I don't remember calling the Uber, only that I sat inside it, headed to my clinic, moving on instinct. When I arrived, I sat in silence in the empty room. The white light reflected on the walls. The sterilizer machine hummed steadily, like the heartbeat of someone barely alive. I opened my phone, went on Facebook, scrolled through Tiffany's posts. There were photos of Lisa learning to talk. Tiffany wrote, "She just said, 'Mama!'" "She's so adorable beneath it," Michael had commented. "She's adorable like her mom." I had once scrolled past it without a hint of doubt. Now, all the pieces fit. Looking back at the timeline, I realized Lisa was born 4 years ago. The same time Michael often came home late, sometimes 1 or 2 in the morning, sometimes not at all, texting, "Tiffany's not okay. She just broke up. I'm afraid she might do something reckless." I used to think he was kind, compassionate. I was touched by my husband's empathy. But perhaps, back then, kindness had already become betrayal. I once believed our marriage was built on honesty, but now I see. Michael had betrayed me with the woman he called his best friend. I don't hate Tiffany the way I hate him. To me, she's just a lonely woman who went too far. But Michael, the man I once called my soulmate, he's the one who stabbed me with the very trust I gave him. I opened the notebook on my desk. The first page still had a list of vaccines for cats. I turned to a new page, picked up my pen, and wrote the first line. If loyalty had a shape, then today it shattered. I looked up, out the window where the early winter rain had started to fall. In that moment, I knew I would not let this pain pass like a memory. I would strike back, and I would reclaim justice for myself. Out there, Boston's lights were flickering on, but inside me, nothing was clear. I knew I had just witnessed something unforgivable, but I couldn't let him know I knew. I needed the truth, needed evidence. not just emotions. I picked up my phone, opened the chat with Michael, and tried to sound as normal as possible. The rescue ended earlier than expected, but I might have to stay a few more days to wrap things up. If I finish early, I'll catch the red-eye flight home, message sent. My heart thudded. Just 15 seconds later, he replied, "That's great news. I miss you so much. Once you've rested, let's do a belated anniversary dinner." I looked at the screen, a bitter smile creeping onto my face. He was still playing the perfect husband, as if last night he hadn't laughed with another child in this very house. The next morning, I returned home in silence. Michael had already left. On the kitchen counter were 2 mugs, his usual coffee, and another with a faint lipstick mark. I looked around. Nothing was messy. Everything was too perfect, too clean, like my life had been erased from it. I opened the drawer where he usually kept his wallet and car keys. A small piece of paper stuck out. I pulled it free. A folded receipt. Teddy's Toy Emporium, white wool stuffed teddy bear, $127, September 12th. September 12th. He had told me he was in New York meeting investors. I remember he video called me, smiling, saying, "I miss you." My hand shook. There was no more doubt. I sat down, opened my laptop. The screen cast a cold blue light on my face. I created a new document, typed 3 words in all caps, "Justice Plan." I snapped a photo of the receipt, saved it into the first folder, named Day of Betrayal 1. Then I opened my notes and listed every detail. Tiffany's license plate, Michael's work hours, the late-night meetings he claimed were urgent. One by one, the puzzle pieces began falling into place. At 10:55 a.m., a loyal client came in with her elderly cat, Mrs. Whitmore, a retired lawyer I deeply respect. As I administered the shot, she looked at me and said softly but firmly, "My dear, your eyes say more than you realize. Something's wrong, isn't it?" I smiled, trying to cover it up. "No, just a bit tired." She nodded slowly and said, "Women only say tired when they're holding it all in. If you suspect someone, don't confront them without proof. Justice always sides with the patient." I stuck to the plan, not letting him know I was in Boston. At 3 p.m., just after finishing a minor surgery at the clinic, I texted Michael, keeping the tone of a wife still far away. "I'm wrapping up paperwork here in California. Might be a late one. How have things been at home?" He called back immediately. His voice was warm and familiar, so much so that if I hadn't known better, I might have believed him again. "Everything's fine. Don't worry about a thing. I've just been busy with work stuff. Oh, and I stopped by Tiffany's last night. She's not doing great again." I gripped the phone tightly. Last night was the night I stood outside the door, hearing a child call him Daddy. 1,000 questions burned in my throat, but I swallowed them down, letting out only a measured touch. "You and Tiffany. Is there something going on that makes you go over there so often?" He paused for a beat, then let out a perfectly crafted sigh, laced with wounded sincerity. "Are you doubting me, Michelle? You know Tiffany once had suicidal thoughts after her breakup. I just don't want her doing anything drastic. I thought you understood my heart. I let the silence linger, listening to the low hum of the air conditioner through the line like it was reminding me to stay calm. Then I spoke, slow and dry. I'm not doubting. I'm just asking. If you're truly just helping, then that's good. Thank you for trusting me," he said softly. "Come home. We'll talk things through. I love you." The call ended. I stared at the dark screen, my chest tight and hollow. Was I angry? Yes. But more terrifying was that I no longer wanted to argue. Not yet. not without proof. That night, alone in the clinic office, I opened our joint bank app and reviewed recent transactions. The words appeared like a black ink stain. Transfer, $2,000. Recipient, Tiffany M. Note: Take care, birthday, 2041. I leaned back in my chair, hearing my heartbeat in every harsh thud. 8:41 p.m. Right after that call with me, he sent her money, with a note that read, "Take care." I screenshot the transfer and saved it to the Justice Plan folder. Transfer 2000 Tiffany 2041 PNG. I reopened the photo of Tiffany's silver car outside the house and added it to the evidence log. The pieces were falling into place. I searched my contacts for Mildred Harper, divorce attorney, a former client who once brought in her beagle for vaccines. I typed a quick email, attaching the teddy bear receipt and the screenshot. Dear Mildred, this is Michelle from Harborlight Animal Clinic. I urgently need legal consultation regarding marriage and finances, possible infidelity, transfers from joint accounts to a third party, and procedures for requesting DNA testing. Attached are 2 initial pieces of evidence. I want to proceed lawfully and quietly until I have a complete file. Thank you. The send button turned gray. I rested my forehead against the back of my hand. Outside the clinic window, Boston glowed like a chessboard, each lit square a story no one else knows. On the desk, the Justice Plan notebook lay open. I added a new line. Day of Betrayal. 2. The first lie has been recorded. The distance between pity and complicity is just one excuse. I turned off the lights. In the dark, I heard something faint, the sound of trust falling to the bottom of my heart, and I knew, from this moment on, every road would lead to the truth. I barely slept that night. I lay curled on the small sofa in my clinic office, listening to the rain tapping on the roof and the wind slipping through the window frame. At first light, I brewed a strong black coffee, opened my laptop, and began combing through our joint account. Michael still believed I was in California. He had no idea I was less than 10 kilometers away, here in Cambridge, working on a plan taking shape. In the transaction history, a long list of unusual expenses appeared, like puzzle pieces I'd never seen before. Maple Leaf Elementary tuition, $3,800. Kids Planet Toy Store, $215. Happy Moments Birthday Photo Studio, $640. All notes repeated one name, Lisa. I opened my notebook and began building a timeline, left column for transaction dates, right column for the excuses Michael had given. Business trips. September 12th. White teddy bear. Meeting investor in New York. November 4th. Maple Leaf tuition. Trip to Dallas. December 21st. Birthday photo shoot. Year-end meeting in Chicago. Each line matched chillingly. For 4 years, every night I stayed up saving the lives of helpless creatures. He was raising another family, with the money I earned. Near noon, my phone buzzed. A reply from Mildred Harper, the lawyer I had emailed the night before. Michelle, I've reviewed your materials. This is a clear case of infidelity and financial abuse. Do not confront him yet. Keep gathering evidence, statements, transfers, invoices, every expense. I recommend preparing a divorce petition and a DNA test request. Stay calm, keep him unaware. Justice takes time, but we will get it. I read the email 3 times, then typed back. Understood. I'll gather more over the next few days. He won't suspect a thing until it's too late. 30 minutes later, I sent Michael a short message, setting the next piece in motion. I'm back in Boston. Tired, but okay. I think I'll stay home for a few days before returning to work. Within 5 minutes, he replied, So happy to hear that. I'll come home early tonight. I want to make things right, Michelle. I looked at the screen. A faint smile crossed my face. He still thought I'd just arrived. He had no idea I'd seen everything. That evening, Michael came home earlier than usual. He brought tulips, the flowers I used to love, but now only felt like a chokehold. He smiled, wrapped his arms around me from behind. His cologne hadn't changed, familiar enough to make my chest ache. "I'm sorry I haven't been more attentive," he whispered. "You've been so tired. What if we took a weekend in Maine?" I turned to him, smiling lightly, voice calm as air. "Sounds nice. I could use a break, too." He took my hand, looked deep into my eyes, and I saw a man who could act down to the last detail. I only nodded. I had to pretend. Mildred's advice echoed. Don't confront him without enough evidence. While he showered, I opened my phone, captured the latest bank statement, and emailed it to Mildred. In the notes, I typed, "This month shows a new $5,200 transfer to account HM. Coincides with Maple Leaf tuition. Likely Tiffany Morgan." I saved a copy, turned off the screen. Michael stepped out of the bathroom, hair still damp, wearing that familiar half-smile, the smile that once made me love him and now left me hollow. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. "I promise everything will be okay." I only nodded. That night, while he slept, I lay still, phone glowing under the covers, and wrote one more line in the justice plan. He says he loves me with words. But he pays for another love. And money doesn't lie. Outside the window, Boston's rain returned. In the soft yellow glow of the lamp, I looked at the man lying beside me and knew that from now on, every breath he took was part of my plan. 3 days later, Michael told me to dress up for his firm's fundraiser, a high-profile event for major investors in the financial sector. He said it was a chance for us to show up as a couple again after such a busy time. And I understood instantly. He needed the mask of a happy marriage. I chose a fitted long black dress, paired with the ivory silk shawl he'd gifted me for our 3rd anniversary. Everything was curated, from outfit to smile. As we stepped into the grand lobby of the Fairmont Copley, hundreds of crystal glasses sparkled under golden chandeliers, soft jazz weaving between murmured conversations. He placed his hand on my back and whispered, "You've always been the best part of my life." I smiled faintly. A good liar always sweetens the blade. The event began. Michael mingled with groups of guests, shaking hands, laughing, proudly introducing me. "This is Michelle, my biggest supporter through every step of my career." Everyone looked at us like a perfect couple. I smiled politely, listening quietly, feeling the invisible cracks beneath the polished surface. And then I saw her. Tiffany, in a pale violet dress, her hair softly curled, wearing a silver star brooch. She entered the hall like a guest of honor, name badge in hand. "Tiffany Morgan, community education consultant." I nearly laughed. Consultant? She had just been promoted in Michael's new narrative, his sponsored project. Michael saw her, and for a split second, their eyes met. Something electric passed between them, long enough for me to recognize a look he never gave me. She nodded. He gave a subtle nod back. But just minutes later, they clinked glasses and exchanged a warm smile, the kind shared by two people who've known more than wine. I held my champagne glass, stepped toward the back of the hall, and gently opened my purse. Beneath tissues and lipstick, my phone was recording. I aimed the camera in their direction, pretending to check messages while it captured every second of Michael and Tiffany's interaction, the smile of two people who knew exactly who they were deceiving. I didn't drink another drop. I just stood there, watching, reminding myself, sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms, but from the moments people think no one's watching. When the event ended, Michael held my hand, flashes going off around us. "Thank you for being with me tonight," he said. I answered softly, "That's what a wife's supposed to do, right?" He nodded, not realizing that sentence was double-edged. That night, after he fell asleep, I pulled out my phone, plugged it in, and replayed the 2-minute video. In the glowing light of the ballroom, Michael and Tiffany's faces were clear. Their eyes, their distance, their smiles, all spoke the truth. I clipped a short segment, emailed it to Mildred with a brief note. First piece of evidence. The screen blinked. Sent successfully. I stared at those words for a long time, then closed the laptop. Outside the window, city lights reflected on the glass, casting my shadow back at me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I was coming back, not as a wife, but as the woman rewriting her own justice. The next morning, I arrived at Mildred's office in downtown Boston. A light rain was falling, mist veiling Beacon Street like a gray curtain. I walked in, carrying the USB drive with the footage from last night's fundraiser. Mildred was waiting in her small office full of divorce files, her gaze firm yet full of empathy. I sat down, my hands still cold, but my voice steady. "I'm ready now, Mildred." "Enough is enough." She nodded, plugged the USB in, and watched the short video. The glow of the screen lit up her stern face. After a few silent seconds, she said slowly, "This is more than clear. We'll begin divorce proceedings immediately, and I want you to request a DNA test to confirm that child is Michael's. If so, he can be charged with concealing a dependent and financial misrepresentation." I listened to every word, like hearing the war drums at the start of a true battle. That same morning, Mildred helped me file the official divorce petition with the Suffolk County Court. The packet was over 10 pages long, with all evidence attached: bank statements, transfers, receipts, the video. I signed my name at the bottom, my pen shaking slightly, but the stroke resolute. That afternoon, Mildred contacted the Massachusetts Child Support Enforcement Agency, reporting suspicions of Michael hiding a child, an act subject to civil charges and severe penalties. I sat across from her, watching each fax go out, my heart pounding yet strangely relieved. Every sheet sent peeled back another layer of his mask. But Mildred knew that to win, I'd need more than paperwork, visual evidence. She referred me to Joseph Turner, a private investigator she'd worked with on high-stakes financial divorce cases. That afternoon, we met at a small cafe near the Charles River. Joseph was in his 40s, tall, quiet, eyes sharp as blades. After my brief summary, he asked only one question. "What level of evidence are you after?" "Suspicion or certainty?" I answered clearly, "Certainty and legal." 2 days later, I received an email from Joseph. Subject line, "Initial observations." He wrote concisely, with attached photos and a detailed report. Michael left his office at least 3 times this week during lunch, around 12:10 to 1:45 p.m. He drove to Riverview Place Apartments in Somerville, where Tiffany Morgan resides. He parked in the garage and went up to apartment 307. He stayed about an hour and a half, then returned to work by 2 p.m., as if coming back from a client lunch. I opened each photo. Undeniable. Michael stepping out of his car, holding a paper bag from a nearby bakery, smiling as Tiffany opened the door. Pictures of them leaving the unit together, her walking him to the parking lot, brushing his shoulder before he walked away. Joseph concluded. The visits are consistent every Tuesday and Thursday. This constitutes repeated infidelity. I stared at the images, no longer in pain, only cold and resolved. The man who said he was meeting clients had been spending lunch breaks cheating. I saved all the photos to the Justice Plan folder, carefully numbered. That night, I sent them all to Mildred, along with this note. Mildred, here is direct evidence. He meets Tiffany twice a week during lunch. Enough for court. Her response came almost instantly. Good. I'll prepare the supplemental file. From now on, Michelle, every step you take is protected by law. We won't fight with pain anymore, but with evidence. I looked out the window. The Boston sunset reflected off the Charles River, staining the sky red. I breathed deep and whispered to myself, he once used time to hide his lies. I'll use every minute now to bury them. The next morning, Michael left early as usual. He kissed my cheek, said he had an important meeting. I simply nodded, silently watching him fade out the door. Once I heard his car pull away, I reached for my phone. I opened my contacts, saw his name on screen, then called. My voice was so calm, it surprised even me. Can we meet this afternoon? At River Bean Cafe, near your office. I want to talk. There was a pause on his end. Then he replied, as gently as ever, Sure. But why not wait till tonight and talk at home? You just got back. I want to cook dinner for you. I smiled, keeping my tone flat. No need. I prefer talking outside. Too many things at home keep us from saying what we really mean. He hesitated a second, then agreed. All right. I want us to talk seriously, too. That afternoon, I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a window seat where sunlight streamed across my steaming cappuccino. I sat quietly, opened my bag, double-checked the evidence on my phone. When Michael walked in, wearing a white shirt and navy tie, the same smile on his face, it was as if nothing had ever happened. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that once thrilled me, now cold as glass. We sat. He talked about new projects, maybe starting his own fund. I let him speak, let him settle into his polished husband role. When he paused, I slid my phone across the table, opened a video file. On screen appeared a dim shot of our living room. Yellow lights, a birthday cake, and a child's voice rang clearly. Daddy? Then Michael's voice, tender and sweet to the bone. I'll always be here. Michael froze. He stared at the screen, then at me, face draining of color. Michelle, when did you film this? I didn't answer. I set down my cup, voice low and steady. That night. When you blew out candles with another woman's child. In my house. He swallowed hard, tried to steady his tone. That was Lisa. You know her. Tiffany asked me to watch her sometimes. I said that to comfort the girl. I didn't want her feeling unloved. Michelle, she doesn't deserve to be hurt. I laughed, but it came out sharp as broken glass. Doesn't deserve to be hurt? You're saying that to me? Do you know what truly doesn't deserve pain, Michael? A wife's trust. I took an envelope from my bag, unfolded documents. Teddy bear receipt dated September 12th, Maple Leaf tuition statements, transfer proof to Tiffany Morgan, and the photo from the fundraiser where he toasted with her in the hotel lobby. I laid each one on the table, voice even and cold. Here's the tuition you paid. Here's the toy you bought on the day you said you were in New York. And here, the moral man, toasting with his mistress at a company event. He couldn't speak. I saw his throat twitch, hands shaking as he stared at the evidence. Finally, he lowered his head, voice rough. I'm sorry. Michelle, I messed up. I was stupid, cowardly. I didn't know it would go this far. It's all my fault, mine alone. I looked at him, no longer the man who was once my whole world, but just someone who had lost the game he rigged. I said softly, eyes fixed on my cooling coffee, "You have 24 hours to leave the house. After that, my attorney will contact you. Don't try to appeal to emotion anymore, Michael. I have proof, and I have the law." He looked up, eyes drained, not angry, just a man who'd lost everything. I stood, placed cash on the table, and said quietly, without looking back, "Thank you. Because of you, I learned how to trust myself." I walked out, leaving behind a man bowed in silence. Outside, the wind stirred, coffee scent mingling with autumn leaves. I opened my phone and texted Mildred. "It's done." He confessed, ready for the next step. I turned off the screen, stood to leave, but just as my hand touched the door, Michael's voice called from behind, no longer trembling or regretful, but cold and bitter. "If you think you can take me down that easily, you're wrong. I'll hire the best attorney in Boston. That house, your clinic, they're marital assets. You won't keep anything." I paused a second, turned to face him. His eyes no longer held guilt, but fear of losing control. I replied softly, but loud enough, "Then try me, Michael. This time, the law is on my side." I turned, pushed open the door, and stepped out. Behind me, his heavy breathing dissolved into the cold wind. Outside, Boston was foggy, the streetlights reflecting off the Charles like 1,000 mirrors, revealing a woman who had just stopped being afraid. That evening, the house was eerily quiet. After the confrontation at the cafe, Michael hadn't dared return. I sat in front of my computer with only the ticking wall clock and the soft rain brushing against the window as company. I opened the browser, the cursor blinking in the search box. Boston Women's Forum, Marriage and Family section. I logged in with an anonymous account named The Vet's Wife. With trembling fingers, I typed, not with rage, but with the stillness of someone who had seen everything. "My husband is a successful man in finance. He speaks of ethics, trust, and family, all while secretly betraying me for 4 years with the woman he called his best friend. They have a child together, while I was still clinging to the belief that our marriage could be saved. I'm not looking for pity. I just want other women to know, when a man says he's meeting a client, sometimes he's just with someone else." I reread the post, then hit submit. Within minutes, hundreds of views. An hour later, over 5,000. Comments poured in. Women sharing similar stories, words of support, others outraged on my behalf. One wrote, "Is he with Brightfield Capital? I heard of a CEO who preaches ethics but lives a lie." Another chimed in, "Sounds like Michael R., always speaking at those investment seminars." If it's him, what a fraud. I didn't reply. I just watched the comments scroll by, feeling both chilled and liberated. I didn't need to name him. The truth was speaking for itself. By morning, the post had spread to Twitter and Reddit. From an anonymous story, it had become a hot topic in Boston's finance circles. Memes mocking the hashtag #ThePerfectCEO flooded timelines. Quotes from Michael's talks on professional integrity were turned into jokes. By noon, I got a message from Tiffany. "Michelle, please. Stop. I'm about to be suspended. The school is investigating. Lisa is still a child. She'll be hurt. Please think of her." I read it, then locked my phone. I didn't hate Tiffany, but I owed her nothing. They chose this path. I was just shining a light where they tried to keep it dark. That same afternoon, Mildred called. Her voice was calm but pleased. "Michelle, the news is spreading faster than I thought." Brightfield's investors are demanding an internal audit. They want to know how much Michael spent on undocumented expenses. Shall I submit the bank statements? I replied quietly, "Do it. I want it all out in the open." That night, Michael came home. His shirt wrinkled, tie loose. He threw his keys on the table, eyes frantic. "What did you do, Michelle?" "The office is a mess. Investors are threatening to pull out. Do you want me to lose everything?" I looked at him, expression steady, unshaken. "No, Michael. I didn't do anything. You did." 4 years ago, he fell silent, bit his lip, and walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving only his fading cologne in the air. I sat down, opened my anonymous post. Over 12,000 shares. No names needed. All of Boston knew. I opened the Justice Plan notebook and wrote one more line. Sometimes, to expose darkness, you just have to turn on a small light. The glow of the screen lit my face, no longer that of a betrayed wife, but of a woman who had made the liar tremble before the truth. 2 days after the post, I did nothing more. I didn't need to. Once the truth had been revealed, it found its own way forward. I only took calls from Mildred and waited to see how justice would unfold. That morning, Mildred called me from her office. Her voice was firm, tinged with quiet satisfaction. "The court has granted the DNA testing request, Michelle. Preliminary results will be in within 2 weeks. Also, the Child Support Services Agency has issued a temporary freeze on Michael's personal accounts for financial obligation verification. I've also submitted the statements you gave me. The transfers to Tiffany will definitely be investigated." I listened, filled with a strange calm. "Thank you, Mildred." At last, the law is beginning to speak. That afternoon, I stopped by Maple Leaf Elementary, where Tiffany teaches. I wasn't there to confront her, only to leave an anonymous envelope in the principal's mailbox. Inside was a printed copy of the now viral article, along with a handwritten note. "A teacher at this school may be involved in an ethical scandal that could affect the institution's reputation. No signature was needed." I just walked away, quietly, as if I had never been there. That evening, the first message arrived. An acquaintance from the parent group wrote to me, "Tiffany got called in by the principal." "She's panicking. Might be suspended." I read it without trembling. I wasn't seeking revenge. I simply stopped protecting a lie. The next morning, the media started picking up the story. The headline on Boston Finance Weekly read, "Brightfield Capital faces ethical crisis. Senior fund manager accused of misconduct and personal scandal." Beneath it was a picture of Michael in a suit, smiling confidently at an investment conference. The comments below the article were merciless. "Ethical investing, hypocritical living, the paradox of modern Wall Street." If he couldn't keep his wife's trust, how can he manage our money? That afternoon, Mildred sent me a photo of an internal memo from Brightfield Capital. "The board has decided to suspend Mr. Michael R., senior portfolio manager, pending audit and internal investigation." I read the words "suspend from duty" twice, then smiled. "Finally, someone is holding him accountable," I whispered. That night, Tiffany sent me another message, longer than any before. "Michelle, you've won. I've lost everything. Please, I'm begging you, stop. Lisa's not at fault. I just want to raise my child in peace." I stared at the screen, not responding. There was no need to. Society, public opinion, and justice were finishing what I had started. When I closed the laptop, I reopened my Justice Plan notebook. The final line of the day, I wrote in small, steady script. "When justice begins to work, I don't need to scream. I just need to stand still and let the truth speak for me. Outside, the autumn wind swept through the window frame, carrying the scent of light rain and the distant echo of car horns. Boston had never felt so peaceful, at least not to me. 3 weeks later, with the scandal still making headlines, I decided it was time to close the chapter. Not with silence, but with truth made public. I booked a table at the Grand Ivy, a restaurant by the Charles River, where we once celebrated our third wedding anniversary. This dinner wasn't just a gathering of friends. It was my final trial, one where justice didn't lie in a judge's hands, but in the eyes of those who had once believed in us. I sent invitations to our closest mutual friends, and to both Michael and Tiffany. In the note, I kept it brief. This is a farewell dinner. Come if you still believe in the truth. That night, the Grand Ivy Banquet Hall shimmered in golden light, crystal glasses glittering under chandeliers. I arrived early, wearing a long black dress, hair neatly pinned, makeup soft but sharp. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the woman who cried in the dark. I saw someone who had turned pain into power. One by one, my friends arrived. The Whitleys, Jenny and Mark, a few colleagues from the vet clinic. At last, Michael walked in, Tiffany by his side, their faces tense, trying to maintain composure. I smiled and welcomed guests as if nothing had happened. As dinner neared its end, I rose gently and lifted my glass. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, I won't say much. I just want to share one thing. The truth sometimes needs light, and tonight, I want to shine that light. The room fell silent. I signaled the tech staff. The large screen at the back lit up. The image appeared, the very video I had recorded that night in my own living room. Lisa's voice rang out, innocent and clear. Daddy? Then Michael's, warm and affectionate. I'll always be here. A few gasps. Some covered their mouths. All eyes turned to Michael. But I didn't stop there. I played the DNA results Mildred had sent just yesterday. The test confirms a 99.97% probability of biological relation between Michael R. and Lisa Morgan. The banquet hall was silent. I could hear Tiffany's sharp breaths in the corner. She broke into sobs, her hand trembling as she clutched Michael's arm. He only bowed his head, his face pale. I stepped into the center of the hall, voice steady and clear. 4 years. 4 years of lies, of promises, of nights I believed you were working late. I don't need an explanation. I just want everyone to see. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from ending silence. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Jenny, who once attended our wedding, stood first. Michelle, I believe you. Then Mark, then the Whitleys. Then one by one, everyone stood, slowly but resolutely. There's no room for betrayal in our circle. Tiffany buried her face, tears soaking the napkin. Michael still didn't lift his head, hands clenched tightly as if holding on to the last shred of pride. I looked at them one last time and nodded. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. From now on, I hope you two live truthfully with each other, the way I've lived truthfully with myself. I walked out, leaving behind heavy stares, whispered words, and a truth freshly unveiled under the glamorous lights. The breeze off the Charles River brushed gently past, carrying a soft chill. I stood on the steps, breathing deep. Behind me, an old chapter was collapsing. Ahead, a new one was opening. No more lies, only light and freedom. 3 days after the evening at the Grand Ivy, the storm officially broke. The news spread faster than Michelle had imagined. On financial media sites, bold headlines emerged. Brightfield Capital under internal investigation amid ethics scandal and alleged embezzlement. At the Brightfield office, the tension was palpable. David Clark, a longtime partner and head of auditing, discovered irregularities in spending. In an internal email, he wrote, "A sum of $120,000 was withdrawn from the contingency fund 3 months ago, without valid invoices. Upon review, the transaction was made by Michael R., labeled as Maple Leaf Community Project Support." But David didn't take long to connect Maple Leaf to the elementary school where Tiffany Morgan teaches. He immediately contacted Mildred, Michelle's attorney, to verify the connection. When cross-referenced with Michelle's evidence, tuition receipts, bank transfers, gifts, and aligned expenditures, everything became alarmingly clear. Michael had embezzled company funds to support his mistress and their child. Mildred forwarded the entire case file to Brightfield's Audit Division and the Massachusetts Financial Oversight Committee. Within 48 hours, Brightfield Capital released a public statement. "We have terminated Mr. Michael R., Senior Portfolio Manager, for serious breaches of ethical and financial conduct. His personal accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Authorities are proceeding with prosecution. As for Tiffany Morgan, after her suspension, she was officially dismissed from Maple Leaf Elementary for seriously damaging the school's reputation." She packed her desk in silence, her face gaunt, while colleagues avoided eye contact as she walked the hallway. Meanwhile, Michelle visited her lawyer's office. She signed the divorce papers, the final page ending 8 years of marriage. The court awarded her full ownership of the Cambridge home and the Harbor Light Animal Clinic. Michael didn't contest. Perhaps he knew he no longer had the right. A few days later, the Child Support Agency issued its official ruling. Mr. Michael R. is ordered to reimburse all past expenses and provide ongoing financial support for the child Lisa Morgan. Per Massachusetts state law, Mildred informed Michelle that the case had been referred to the Bureau of Financial Investigations for embezzlement and fraud. The proposed sentence could reach up to 6 years in prison. That evening, Michelle returned home, sitting in the empty kitchen. The soft yellow light fell across the wooden table, once the setting for dinners, stories, and laughter. She opened her laptop and read the latest headline. "Former Brightfield Fund Manager faces embezzlement charges. Estimated losses at $120,000. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. No more tears, no more shaking. Only peace, the kind found by those who have weathered the storm and remained standing. "Justice begins with truth," she whispered. The wind whispered through the window, carrying the chill of Boston's November air. Michelle looked outside. The sky still dark, but in the distance, streetlights shimmered on the surface of the Charles River, sparkling like a quiet promise that even the deepest darkness must one day give way to light. 5 weeks later, I sat in my new office, a small but sunlit space, where the nameplate had just gone up a few weeks ago. Phoenix Divorce Solutions. The name Phoenix was not just a symbol of rebirth. It was my story. Someone once burned by betrayal, who had learned to rise from her own ashes. Mildred, the woman who had stood by me when everything collapsed, was now my official partner. We started this firm to help women reclaim their financial rights and dignity through legal counsel, asset management, and psychological therapy. Every day, I met new faces. A middle-aged woman clutching bank statements her husband had controlled. A young mother holding her child, her eyes lost but resilient. I saw myself in them. Women who once thought justice was a luxury until they learned how to claim it. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at the Women's Financial Freedom Conference, an event bringing together hundreds of women, lawyers, entrepreneurs, and social activists. As I stood on stage, the spotlight on me, I saw eyes looking up, expectant, empathetic, trusting. I began. There was a time I believed justice meant making others pay. But then I realized true justice is when you get yourself back, when pain no longer controls you, but becomes the strength to lift others. The applause was long and warm. Mildred smiled from the front row, nodding gently, a silent blessing. 2 months later, I heard Michael had been sentenced to 6 years in prison for embezzlement and financial fraud. He was stripped of all authority in the investment world, lost his reputation, lost everything he once took pride in. As for Tiffany, after being fired from the school, she moved back in with her parents in suburban Worcester, unable to find new work. I didn't feel joy, nor sadness. It was simply a natural consequence, the result of choices they had made. As for me, I returned to the simple life I had once forgotten. On weekends, I visited the Animal Rescue Center in Cambridge, where it all began. I adopted 3 abandoned animals, an old Labrador, a limping corgi, and a black cat named Midnight. I cared for them, played with them, and sometimes smiled at the thought that by saving these small lives, I was saving myself. In the late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind flaming red trees, I sat by the window, watching people pass by. A hot cup of tea on the table, 3 animals curled up beneath my feet. I thought to myself, justice doesn't end with punishment. It ends with peace. And for me, peace had begun. On an early winter morning, the season's first snow fell gently on the glass roof of the Cambridge Rescue Center. I stopped by as usual, but today a special soul caught my attention. A small golden-haired dog, blind, yet still lifting its head at every sound. They said it had been rescued from the wildfires in California the year before, during the same time I was there on a work trip. They hadn't named it yet, but I simply smiled and said, "Her name is Hope." As I held Hope in my arms, I felt my heart beat with a new rhythm, no longer heavy, but light as breath. She trembled in my hands, seeking warmth, and I realized I had once been just like her, lost in darkness, guided only by the feeling in my chest. I brought Hope home, settling her beside the 3 other little creatures. They curled around her, as if they understood that here, no one had anything left to fear. That afternoon, while reorganizing my office, I found a small box high on the shelf. Inside was the silver necklace I had once planned to give Michael for our 8th anniversary. I held it for a long moment, then hung it on the wall beside my desk. In the dim light, the silver glinted like a quiet reminder. Beneath it, I carved into a wooden plaque. Loyalty belongs only to honesty. That night, I opened my justice plan notebook again. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, evidence, statements, old tears, all now lying silent before me. I turned to the last page and wrote a single line, short but enough to close the journey. I didn't lose everything. I only lost an illusion. I closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf. Outside, the wind brushed past the window, carrying the sounds of ordinary life, traffic, laughter, Hope softly barking in her sleep. And I knew my life had truly begun again. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning, I took Hope for a walk in the public garden. The sky was clear, the sunlight dancing on the lake. As I fastened Hope's leash near a bench, a voice softly called from behind. "Michelle?" I turned. Tiffany stood there, gaunt, her face thinner, her eyes both shy and uncertain. Beside her was Lisa, now 5, her blonde hair in loose curls. The child smiled at me, innocent, untouched by the mistakes of adults. Lisa ran forward and pointed at Hope. "You know my daddy?" I knelt down, gently smiled, and brushed her hair. "I used to know someone, but now I know peace." Tiffany stood still, tears running silently down her cheeks. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I lost everything, and I know you never wanted that. I just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me the way I did to you." I looked at her for a long moment, my voice soft as the breeze. "I never wanted anyone to suffer, Tiffany. I just needed peace. The rest, each of us has to face what we've sown." Tiffany nodded, took Lisa's hand, and walked away. I watched them go. No hatred, no pity, only a sadness light as dust in the sun. That afternoon, my sister Rebecca called. "You know Michael's working as a waiter now, downtown. Tiffany's tutoring privately." "Life has its ways of teaching people," I answered softly, a faint smile on my lips. "No one needs to suffer, Rebecca. I just needed peace. That's enough." I looked at Hope, curled up by my feet, and thought, maybe forgiveness isn't forgetting. Maybe it's finally laying down what's become too heavy to carry. A few months later, I was invited to speak on the popular podcast, Women Who Rise. That day's topic, Women and Rebirth After Betrayal. I sat before the microphone, warm yellow lights shining down, the host's voice calm and kind. "Michelle, if you could say just one thing to the women listening right now, what would it be?" I smiled, looking straight into the recorder. Betrayal doesn't end you. It only ends the illusion of who you trusted. The only thing that truly ends a woman is when she stops believing in herself. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then the host gently placed a hand on my shoulder and nodded. Final scene. That evening, I walked Hope along the banks of the Charles River. The sunset glowed warm orange, mirrored on the water. Hope walked slowly beside me, ears low, cautious but steady. Like me, step by step, finding direction in a new world. The breeze passed by, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant chime of church bells. I looked up and smiled, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer defined me. Justice begins with truth. Peace begins when you forgive yourself. The screen faded to black, leaving only the reflection of sunset on water and the image of Michelle and Hope continuing their walk toward the light. If this story touched you, please click like so more women can find it. And don't forget to subscribe, so together we can spread real journeys where justice isn't just a verdict, but the peace we reclaim for ourselves.